My rebel is your terrorist? Something like that.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my Andor episodes 4, 5, and 6 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs, great episodes, much better, I think, than the first 3 episodes, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get everything. We are now halfway through the season. There are only 2 weeks left because each week they are dropping 3 episodes together, and there are 12 episodes total. Looking at you, Star Wars, all you gotta do is just release all the rest of those next week. Episode 4 title was Have You Ever Been to Gorman, which is a reference to Cyril's conversation with his mother and what's going on there since he and Dedra took over administration of the planet, or Dedra technically took over and then had him transferred there because of her whole long-term plot to try and get the rebellion to set up shop there so that the Empire would have an excuse to actually roll in a whole bunch of troops in force and completely take over the planet so that they could extract all the calcite to coat the reactor lenses on the Death Star for. That's what the whole unlimited energy plan is actually meant to be for. So part of the whole joke here is that even though they're playing this Cyril storyline, like he thinks he's doing all this cloak and dagger stuff trying to help out Dedra, but Dedra's really pulling the strings on all this because of this grand plot that they have. So Cyril is being misled here, but also Dedra and even Partagaz are being misled about why they're doing all of this on Gorman in the first place. It has nothing to do with unlimited energy, it's all about getting the Death Star functional. So there's a whole lot of references to that through these next 3 episodes in particular, just as this Gorman plot slowly percolates in the background, like it's just barely heating up, like we're slowly getting more and more of that. They might wait till like the last block of episodes before the actual Gorman massacre goes down. But even comparing these episodes to all the Season 1 episodes and the previous ones this season, this is probably the darkest block of episodes that we've had on the show so far, or just in Star Wars in general. Definitely way darker than any of the movies have tried to go before. The episode starts 1 year after the end of the last block of episodes, and as predicted, for this new block of 4, 5, and 6, they start episode 4, the first part of the block, with another 1 year later title card in the same anvil ringing from Ferrix, the date title card of BBY3, 3 years before the Battle of Yavin, like 1 year closer to the events of Rogue One. They're basically going to end the finale right before the opening scene of Rogue One, like that's what they're meant to sync up with the timeline. It begins with Bix having another nightmare about her torture last season at the hands of Dr. Gorse, I think to bookend this block of episodes because at the very end of this, they end on her killing him using his own torture device. What an ironic death. Do not press F to pay respects. He deserved to die. But at least earlier in her arc, they just paint a very grim outlook for her character. Like things are just getting worse and worse and worse for her. She's like spiraling and spiraling out of control. But at least at this point, a year has gone by, she's been living with Andor on Coruscant in one of Luthen's safe houses. She still can't sleep, and if you've seen anybody that can't sleep, or you yourself has ever gone through periods of sleeplessness, it really, really hurts your body. And just because torture is a big part of Bix's storyline, one of the worst ways that you could actually torture someone is to not let them get sleep. So she's basically at the point now when she's having trouble distinguishing reality from her dreams, and she just begins to waste away episode to episode. Love the way they transition a lot during her scenes too, where like it'll go from her nightmare, like she'll just be dreaming something, or somebody else will be having a nightmare about her, and then it'll transition back to reality slowly. But in her nightmare, Gorse calls out the rebellion metaphorically, but in the episode they use it as a callback to the whole theme of Season 2, showing the larger rebellion forming. There are many, many different references and conversations that people have over the next couple of episodes too, knowingly and unknowingly about the actual rebellion forming.
This is Admiral Radish of the Rebel Alliance.
Then the music swells up as we head to Gorman. Everything is looking up and up for Syril Karn, just the same way they started his block of episodes last week too, where like all the other storylines seemed like they were running terribly for different characters. Like everybody was just going through it, except for Syril Karn and Dedra, who were just doing amazing. Like it was a weird contrast where like the worst people, like the most terrible people were having the best time of all. And they basically explained the past year, Dedra had Cyril transferred to Gorman, and he set up shop in one of the offices there in the department that he works in, and is basically running the place like he believes that he is slowly trying to infiltrate the rebels there. But remember, this is all just Dedra trying to pull the strings so that they can move in, they can swoop in with all their Imperial troops and take over the planet eventually. He has a phone call with his mother. Per Dedra's deal with her, remember, he would contact her or visit her at least twice a month as long as she didn't bother Dedra ever again. He starts noticing the protesters in the town square. The monument here, they explain, is part of a massacre that Grand Moff Tarkin perpetrated 16 years ago when protesters would not clear a path for his landing shuttle. He literally just landed his shuttle on 500 people, killing them all. All this obviously a lot of table setting sort of percolating up into what will become the official Gorman Massacre as is described in Star Wars lore, basically the tipping point in the formation of the actual large rebellion force. So there's many more references to the Tarkin Massacre previously to sort of foreshadow the Gorman Massacre happening in the exact same place, but being way, way worse. When his mother mentions the Outer Rim, Gorman is actually in the interior colonies section of the galaxy, closer to the core worlds, the Inner Rim, where the wealthier, more powerful planets exist. She references the spiders, which are native to the planet, which they get the silk to make their legendary fabric that the planet is famous for, which also sets up him bringing the spider gift back to her eventually. All this design on the planet, like all the buildings, the interiors, it all looks amazing. It's very easy to understand why this show cost so much money, but every last bit of it you can see up on screen, like it translates extremely well on screen. It was worth every penny. It looks so much better than say like The Mandalorian or Ahsoka, which used the volume heavily. There's a big callback to the Empire's propaganda wing when his mother says Gorman thinks it's too good for everyone else, and he says she's been watching too much of the Imperial news, because they went on and on about how they were trying to get the galaxy to believe that Gorman was terrible with their fake news, and it looks like it's been successful because his mother, who's addicted to the news it sounds like a lot of people in real life, just believe anything she hears on TV. There were some questions about this previously. Star Wars does have their own version of a TV network, communications network kind of thing, but it's called the HoloNet. The way they play Cyril's storyline for the most part in the next couple of episodes, it seems like he's slowly grown fond of his life on Gorman and the people there, like he really enjoys the work that he's doing here, but that's because he thinks he's been transferred here to do actual regular work like he would normally be doing on Coruscant, so he wants to do a good job so that he will advance his career in the Empire. He has no idea that it's all just part of this grand ruse that Dedra is trying to orchestrate. But he really, really gets into character. Like his OCD, his obsessive nature, like really lends itself to this. Like he's really, really enjoying himself as part of all this. There are a couple other interesting Star Wars firsts too. Like there's a lot of things they do for the first time in Star Wars episodes during this block. His mother implies that one of the propaganda techniques that wing of the Empire is using is making it look like Gorman rebels are making anti-Emperor Palpatine videos that make fun of him and broadcasting them on the HoloNet.
This mockery of Emperor Palpatine.
I think that's just meant to be a reference to a lot of the types of political ads you see during election years that people will run against each other. Like, that other candidate, he's terrible. Like, they make some video that make them look incompetent. But I don't think we've ever actually had references in the Star Wars movies, even the TV shows or the books or anything like that, to anybody in the Star Wars galaxy making anti-Palpatine funny ads that make him look ridiculous. Cyril also makes it sound like the Empire regularly has employees at every level in every department take loyalty oaths, probably on pain of either losing their jobs or even going to prison sometimes. I think a lot of what's going on Gorman, like a lot of the references, are mostly to what life was like under Nazis in Germany during World War II. Like a lot of the stuff that goes on here is stuff that you saw during World War II. We learn more about the Gorman rebels who are listening to his conversations. It's hard to tell if they're the ones being manipulated by Dedra, the Empire, or they're just regular rebels who are doing their own thing. It sounds like it's the latter, and Dedra is just using that as an opportunity, trying to actually help them enough to the point where it becomes a visible problem, allowing the Empire to roll in force. So the whole idea is that Dedra is just kind of letting this all happen and actually actively trying to promote it later by the time we get to the third episode. Then I believe we have another first in Star Wars. We go back to Coruscant with Bix and Andor just going grocery shopping. I don't think we've ever actually seen a real grocery store in Star Wars before. It actually looks like a very appetizing grocery store, like I'm actually super hungry just watching this scene again. They mostly use this scene to show you what their life has been like trying to stay on the DL inside Coruscant, which is like the most heavily surveilled planet in the galaxy just because it is the Imperial capital. When the shop owner mentions the melons from Yukio, that's a planet they just featured in the Star Wars Outlaws game. There are a lot of planets and artifacts that they mention from lore in the episode, but some of the stuff they did create for the episode, so I'll point those out as we get to those Easter eggs. Yukio is also notable because it lies along the path of Leia's Corellian Corvette that it took at the end of Rogue One when she was trying to escape with the Death Star plans. During this scene of Andor, watching her, if you look next to him in those red cartons, that looks like they're cartons of blue milk. There is some blue milk in later episodes, though, when Cyril goes back to visit his mother. Would not be Star Wars if they didn't try to work in blue milk somewhere. Then we get another Star Wars first. Back at their safe house, we see what looks like the Star Wars version of an air fryer. There's a much more serious conversation about a mission that they just had where it sounds like Andor had to kill someone, maybe a member of their group, and he just compartmentalizes it. They want to show you how his character slowly gets to the point where he's willing to do morally gray stuff like that and be fine with it. But there are a couple lines at this point that he won't cross yet. For instance, killing Bix if she becomes too much of a liability. We'll get to that in a second because Luthen basically tells him, are you going to deal with her if you have to, like if she becomes too much of a problem? Bix references Marva and his sister again. There's been a lot of theories since season 1 that Dedra is going to secretly wind up being Andor's long-lost sister just because she had this mysterious past involving her parents being criminals, raised in an Imperial Kinderblock, and it just sounded kind of sus, like, sounds like you actually might be connected to some other big characters. We will see if there are any more clues about what really happened to his sister. It would be really weird if they never pay that off by the end of this season, given that this is the final season of the show. There are a couple of funny moments here when Cyril goes back to his office on Gorman in the middle of the night. He's not cleared to enter the building, even though Dedra had him transferred there and he's the head of the office, just to show you how hardcore things are there under Imperial rule.
Take 5 minutes. Sorry.
All of this, though, is a ruse to give him an opportunity to contact Dedra, which she knows all about. So that's the other joke here, too, is that she's just kind of playing along with him, pretending like he's doing this big cloak and dagger operation, when really she's just waiting for the right moment to happen with the rebels so that they can roll in and upgrade their plan to something more hardcore. She's just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, like Dedra just kind of like nodding, yes, okay, that's all great, on and on, like come on, anytime now, how about you try and infiltrate those rebels so we can move along with this plan. They're calling the rebel group on Gorman, the Gorman Front. Back at the ISB on Coruscant, they have another meeting. I always love the meetings that they have in this office, like it's always so kinetic the way they film these, just because of the way the building is shaped in this circular way. When they talk about raiding 3 planets and seizing a whole bunch of assets and money, basically that's also a reference to Nazi Germany. They would do that all the time, where they would basically just arrest people and steal all their assets and use them to fund their war efforts. Within the Star Wars universe, the Empire had to get its money to fund the Death Star from somewhere, and it sounds like a lot of it they just stole from people. We're still a long ways away from them learning about the treasure planet, the Imperial Mint, on At-Atten during the Skeleton Crew series. Remember, they didn't really learn about that during the events of the original trilogy or even during the prequels, and it's kind of implied that Emperor Palpatine did not know about it, because if he did, they probably would have just used the Mint to fund the creation of many more Death Stars. They literally would have had the resources to create infinite Death Stars. They mentioned the Axis Project again. That was Dedra's original plan to discover who Andor was and uncover the rebellion, the axis of rebel activity, basically. Luthen's inside man here suggests that they're being heavy-handed, and that's why they haven't successfully uncovered the rebel leaders yet. Like, they're literally arresting too many people for them to be able to process them effectively. Basically, the whole idea that they can't torture people fast enough. Partagaz says he's got a meeting with Emperor Palpatine and Yularen soon to discuss their issues trying to onboard people faster, basically like intake people faster. It's a very cold way of describing arresting people faster. When Dedra talks about Andor specifically, calls him out, they just imply there's going to be eventually some kind of confrontation between the two of them this season. Notice she's got darker roots in her hair too, like she dyes her hair blonde. Maybe that does mean there'll be some deeper connection between those two characters, just because it seems like they are hyping up some confrontation between the two of them and a confrontation between Andor and Cyril Karn because of everything that's happening on Gorman. But a big part of the idea is that during Season 1, Cyril, Karn, and Dedra then were obsessed with Andor, and now it's all just coming together, like everyone's converging on Gorman. Mon Mothma gets a montage near the Imperial Senate building, going around talking to different senators, trying to get their support for measures that will eventually help Gorman. Basically, everyone's starting to question why the Empire is so obsessed with Gorman. Nobody at this point really knows about what's really going on with the Death Star. When she talks about the PORD and emergency measures, overreactions, only being temporary but now being a permanent thing, that's more references to Palpatine slowly being granted more and more power through the Senate to the point where he became the Emperor and eventually will become powerful enough politically and legally to dissolve the Senate itself. That winds up happening just as A New Hope is beginning. A lot of this montage they also use to sort of tie Mon Mothma to the Gorman's cause to explain why she cares so much about what's happening on the planet and why it will become such a big piece that she uses to help create the rebellion itself, like bring them all together. Basically, the actual massacre that goes down on Gorman eventually will be the tipping point that drives a lot more support towards the actual rebellion and allows them to come together as like a large fighting force capable of actually fighting it out in a space battle with the Empire.
Sir, those are rebel ships!
But the actual beginning of the Galactic Civil War, like the first real engagement, wasn't until the rebels came to Scarif during the events of Rogue One. We get another meeting between Lonnie and Luthen in the lower levels. His speech during Season 1, still probably the best speech that's ever been given inside a Star Wars movie or TV show. So he informs him about Dedra's mission on Gorman, and now Luthen is concerned with what's happening on Gorman. Like, why is the Empire so obsessed with Gorman? Then we go to that secret meeting of the rebels that they tried to get Cyril to show up for, thinking that because he was on the inside, like he was an administrator inside the Empire, he'd be able to help them out and get those plans to prove what they were doing, building the base on the planet. There are a couple of sly references here too when they're talking about all the bad things going on here. The man is basically speaking about the taxation of trade routes. It's a huge Easter egg for the Phantom Menace and a callback to Palpatine's larger plan to manipulate the Clone Wars so that he could take more power and eventually form the Empire in the first place. So he was behind the plot of the Nemoidians and the Separatists taxing the Naboo trade routes. Now he's kind of doing that again with Gorman, like just making life on Gorman very, very difficult for them. But at least in this case, they're basically trying to cut off all commerce to and from Gorman eventually, like slowly choke the planet off so that people will leave the planet to find better business elsewhere and make it easier for the Empire to extract all those resources. They reference the Tarkin massacre, which I already explained, him basically killing 500 people 16 years ago in the monument in the town's center, where the Gorman massacre, the much larger Gorman massacre, is going to also go down. If it wasn't clear though, the whole reason why the Empire is building that giant fortress on the planet is just to support all the gear, the troops, the stormtroopers, the mining gear that they're going to need to extract all the Calcite.
We're building a new armory in Palmo.
There's a whole bunch of jokes here about Cyril secretly being a plant for the Empire, which is kind of true, but in reality, he's just a patsy for Dedra because she wants this to all go down. Like, he's just there to get more information and sort of help foster all the stuff that's happening with the rebellion here. Back on Coruscant, Andor's given the mission by Luthen to go to Gorman and find out what's actually going on there. Then we travel to the Dakar system. This also wound up being the place where Leia's rebel group in the sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens, wind up having their main base too. There are a couple of sly references to that, but like visually here when you first arrive, it's meant to look the exact same. We find out at this point in the timeline, it's being used by Saw Gerrera's rebel cell, and they use this for his storyline in Wilman. They reveal Saw Gerrera is basically going to steal a whole bunch of fuel and needs Wilman's help to figure out how to extract it correctly. They mostly use this storyline to just show you how batshit crazy Saw Gerrera is, and he's just as nutters as a lot of the worst Imperials, just in a completely different direction. Like, not all the rebels were like really nice, really mentally stable people. Love the way they end this episode with Bix and Andor too, with her little drugs that she's got. Just very, very dark stuff for Star Wars. Just totally love it, how dark they're going. Then the episode 5 title was I Have Friends Everywhere, which is a reference to the Rebel password phrase that they give in this episode and in next week's episode. Most of this episode, though, deals with Andor on Gorman and finding out what's going on there. They start this episode during the opening titles with the sound of Clea in Luthen's radio in their shop. There's mention of Ryloth. We've actually visited there a bunch of times during the Clone Wars episodes. She scans through the different channels, picks up someone cursing in Huttese. different stations. Corellia is mentioned. We get more Easter eggs from inside Luthen's shop. This here is Padme's crown that she was wearing at the beginning of The Phantom Menace. Her other headpiece is still here from the last batch of episodes. She wore this in later parts of the prequels, and Plo Koon's mask as well.
You will not be so pleased when you hear what I have to say, Viceroy.
There are a couple Easter eggs from last year, too, from Season 1, like Jango Fett's armor chestplate. She listens to a clip of Davos Skolden talking about a piece of his that winds up being a fake forgery. That plays into the later parts of the episode where they try to swap out the listening device. When Andor goes to get the information he needs to infiltrate Gorman, he passes by a gonk droid that looks really souped up in the background. Would not be Star Wars if they didn't try to work in a gonk droid somewhere to a scene. He gives that rebel passphrase to the woman saying the title of the episode. He said the name of the thing inside the thing. His codename Varian Sky isn't a person from Star Wars before this, like it's not a reference to anyone specifically, they just created the name for the show. Tahini was referenced during Andor Season 1, Episode 1, like the very beginning of the show, when a woman at the bar at the beginning of the episode said that they had another girl that was from Tahini. Back on Gorman, when the Empire busts into Cyril's office about the listening device looking for it, I think the idea is that he knows all about what's going on here, and he's just trying to slowly ingratiate himself with the rebels. Like, oh, see, they're after me. Like, I hate the ISB because they're messing up my office all the time. Then later, when they learn about him being fired on Morlana 1 for the whole event that went down with Andor, like that goes back to the very beginning of the show, that also helps him get in deeper with the rebels. Like, oh yeah, even more reason to hate the ISB and the Empire. There are a couple funny moments though, because even though he's really pissed off about what's happening with the ISB and it's all kind of a ruse, he still wants them to continue the audit they were in the middle of working on. Like, no matter what's happening with the secret cloak and dagger plot that he's trying to help Dedra with, he still wants to get his regular workload done. That is how OCD he is about doing his work. Also, side note, I absolutely love every piece of technology like the computer consoles, the monitor designs in his office. If somebody like Apple could start making that so that we could buy it, that would be amazing. When Cyril meets with the rebels again later that night, they mention Emperor Palpatine again, saying that the Emperor tries to make it seem like he doesn't know what's being done on his behalf, when in truth, there is nothing that the Empire does that the Emperor does not know about or orchestrate himself personally. When he talks about shadow government, that's also another callback to the Death Star plot on Gorman, like the real reason why the Empire is moving in and pulling all these strings. Later when Luthen comes to visit Bix, it does seem like he's genuinely concerned about her, but, like he talks to Andor about later, he's totally prepared to either kill her or have her killed or have Andor kill her if she becomes a liability to, quote-unquote, the cause. We'll get into this later when he has his argument with Andor after Andor finds out about this whole conversation that he has with Bix. Like, how dare you do this to Bix? All because it's another version of the conversation that he had in Season 1 about how he had given everything to the cause, like the greatest speech in all of Star Wars. Basically the idea that Luthen had already given every piece of himself that he could possibly give, metaphorically and literally, to the cause, but Andor has not quite gotten to that point yet. Like, he wasn't quite willing to give up every single little thing because he still cared about Bix so much. But the whole bit here with her spiral and her addiction just seems like it is not going to end well for her. And remember, she isn't mentioned during Rogue One at all or anywhere else in the canon, so that means she's probably going to have to die somehow in some tragic way before the end of the season. Willman keeps teaching Saw's rebels how to operate the extraction machine here. Obviously, this is meant to set up the whole twist with him being a plant and Saw killing him and Willman joining his crew. Andor then arrives on Gorman in the town square. Love the way this architecture looks inside the hotel. It looks completely different from the other buildings too. Like, this is really where all the money went. Like when you wonder why the series cost so much money.
The monument.
They point out the monument to the Tarkin massacre, and his bellhop explained he was there personally and his father died protecting him during that event. And they basically use this storyline to get you to care about the regular people living here even more, so that when the Gorman massacre goes down later this season, it hits so much harder because you care about these people. Like a lot of their scenes in previous episodes, Cyril and Dedra have probably one of the funniest storylines, like one of the happiest, funniest storylines. He arrives back home and they have the most awkward, let's get it on kind of moment where she basically almost looks like she's visibly disgusted, like she's trying to kiss him on the cheek, like this is really weird moment, and says, turn out the lights, because she's basically telling him, okay, fine, you only have an hour, let's get it on for this hour. Very, very efficient, like it's all about efficiency with her. So if anybody wondered if Cyril Karn and Dedra have been getting it on since they've been a couple, yes, but it seems like it's very, very rarely. On Gorman, Andor meets with the rebels at the cafe. He gets real with her, like this is what it's going to take to be a rebel if you actually want to be effective, and they reference Luther, like that's the friend that they've been talking to but never seen. You can kind of see during this scene too, when Andor is giving them advice on spycraft, how he's gotten so much better and so much more careful about it. Then we go back to Cyril reuniting with his mother, giving her the toy spider. He eats more of that cereal that he loved in season 1 with more blue milk, his favorite dish. And we go to the Good Morning Coruscant TV show, which seems like a generic Good Morning America parody made to be Imperial propaganda that Bix is seen watching because things have just descended into chaos without Andor there to help keep her up and up. When they mention the Senate investiture, that's the whole idea that there's a celebration that's happening on Coruscant for all the new senators that are being minted on that particular event, like brand new senators that are entering office. When Andor clocks the new Imperial base being built in the distance, it's massive, it's got a dome shape too on the frame, it just seems like it's a not so subtle reference to the Death Star. He mentions the rebel pilot that they saved in the mountains that gave the radio that Clea passed to them, and a fresh crystal that allows the Gormanites to use the radio to contact the other members of the rebellion. When they say they have a source on the inside that's going to help them, they're talking about Cyril Karn, but obviously not what they think because he's just trying to infiltrate their group for Dedra. When Andor gets afraid and wants to back out just because he thinks that this might be a trap, he is obviously correct. All this going on here is meant to be a setup. Cyril then probably has one of the other funniest moments that we've ever seen on the show so far. He gets a chance to meet Partagaz, absolutely loving this, and tells him about this plan, and Partagaz is basically like, okay, that sounds good, let's proceed. And it winds up being the greatest day in his life ever. Love the way that he reacts to this too, like, is it spoiling it if I call it out loud? Like if I say it out loud, will that spoil the moment? And even though that was very funny, they take it a step further with the way that Dedra also reacts to this moment too, where she's clearly happy, but it seems like she just doesn't know how to express happiness, so like she makes this weird motion on her face like she's trying to smile, but doesn't quite know how to smile. Back at Luthen Shot, though, they mentioned the Tinian Codex, which is the object in his collection where the listening device is. That's not something that's in Star Wars, but there is something called the Tyrannic Codex in lore, but that was a dark side book. That might be what they're basing this on. When they mention the Koryo Chalice, that is something that is not from Star Wars lore, like that's completely created for the series. But the whole threat here is that on reinspection, they would find the listening device, connect it back to Luthen's shop, and that would basically stop the rebellion, like kill the rebellion in its crib before it finishes being created.
They're going to examine everything in the collection.
Clea mentions they were able to use the bug successfully already to catch Yularen in a lie of some kind. They mention a scandal involving the Grand Vizier, who we saw during the prequels, Skolden trying to get in tight with him. They also referenced the Grand Vizier during Season 1, too. The whole reason why they would care about monitoring Skolden's communications is because he tries to get in so tight with so many high-ranking Imperials. Then we finally see Saw Gerrera killing his own man, big surprise twist, revealing that he'd been a traitor this whole time, and the Empire was going to ambush them on their big supply run mission. They're just getting the fuel that they wanted now, they'll be long gone when the Empire shows up. When he says they take what they want, they burn the rest, and they won't be back this way again, that's just a sly reference, I think, to the Rebels not using this base again until Leia starts using it during the sequel trilogy in Force Awakens. Like somebody will eventually show up here and use this. But the whole reason why Wilman is still alive now, because Saw was going to kill him to eliminate the potential for him informing on them, is because he's now the only person who knows how to work that extraction device. When they're actually robbing the fuel depot and he starts talking about his origin story, the camps in the Onderon jungle, they kind of got into this during the Bad Batch in the Clone Wars episodes. Saw reveals he actually intends on destroying the fuel depot and basically gets Willman to start inhaling fumes with him. Maybe this drives him a little bit nuts too for the rest of the series. But it is kind of funny here watching him get super high, huffing all these fumes. The episode 6 title was What a Festive Evening, which is a reference to Skolden's party where Luthen and Kleya try to remove their listening device to avoid them uncovering the rebellion. But the episode starts at Steergard, the same planet where that young cadet from Chandrila was stationed, and the same planet that Andor stole the hyperspace device from in Season 1, the whole way that he met Luthen in the first place, and he's being picked up by Luthen from his recent mission to Gorman. There are a couple of jokes, and this is where it gets real dark. So there are a lot of theories about this when the season started, is that what if Luthen had something to do with the Gorman massacre too? In the way that he explains it is that Luthen is totally ready to sacrifice everybody on Gorman if it means the success of the rebellion. That's why later Andor says something that Luthen said made me afraid. He's afraid because Luthen is so willing to let all those people on Gorman die. If it goes up in flames, it will burn very brightly. And he is not wrong. That is why they call it the Gorman Massacre. It does not end well. But it is very, very good for the long-term success of the rebellion. Like, it's critical for the success of the rebellion. Then we find that even though Andor wants nothing to do with Gorman right now, he's already sent Velsartha to pull off this heist plan to find out what's going on in the convoy, to prove there are weapons there, to try and maybe do something bigger, basically try to out the Empire for what they're doing, even though it's probably going to end badly for the people on Gorman. Andor finds out what Luthen did visiting Bix, gets worried why he would visit her, just starts to get suspicious, maybe he's going to try and kill us at some point. When he goes to yell at Luthen at his shop, it gets even darker because Luthen basically tells him that eventually he's going to need to be prepared to deal with Bix, kill her if she becomes too much of a liability. There's a brief scene of Mon Mothma and her husband then planning out the evening of parties. There are a bunch of different parties and they're just planning on which ones they have times to go to, like how long they're going to stay at each party. The investiture banquets are to honor all the people that are joining the Senate, becoming new senators. I think the reason why it's important there are so many of them, like why they make such a note of it, is because the Empire's influence is growing, and the part of the idea is the Death Star is going to crystallize that control and bring, quote-unquote, other systems in line. So all of a sudden you're seeing more and more senators joining the Empire because they're afraid of the Empire, which is why they need more senators joining the Senate for those planets.
Fear will keep the local systems in line.
Back at the ISB, Partagaz basically says Emperor Palpatine is so impressed by Gort's abilities to interrogate and torture people that he's turning him into an entire department, and the ISB won't be able to use him the way they want to going forward. But he probably winds up having one of the best quotes of the series next to some of the ones from Season 1 when he says, "Calibrate your enthusiasm." Somebody should put that on a t-shirt. We go back to Gorman. Velsartha reunites with Cinta. They explained that in the past year, something really terrible happened to Cinta after the last time that we saw her. She had to recover for a long time, and they basically deal with their relationship here, basically trying to build up so that her death later in the episodes will pay off harder. Love the way they edited the whole last part of the episode here with all the different storylines intercut with each other and these things building to a crescendo. Andor and Bix go on their mission to kill Gorst. Velsartha's group plans and executes their heist, while the party group tries to remove that listening device, and we get a whole bunch of Easter eggs and a bunch of great moments between Mon Mothma and Krennic. But one of the other real big cameo scenes during this part of the episode was Bail Organa, and it was a big change because obviously they recast Jimmy Smits with Benjamin Bratt. The reason they said they did this is because when they were actually filming the episode, they couldn't get Jimmy Smits. He was busy filming something else, and they wanted to use Bail Organa. We will see how they wind up using the actor, the character again, the rest of the series. I'm expecting Bail Organa to show up again, just because that's where we're headed on the show. Like, you just have to include him at a certain point. They mention his wife. We actually saw her during the Kenobi series and during the prequels as well, too. While the party is going on, we have the heist going on Gorman, with Cyril Karn also monitoring it for Partagaz and Dedra. The reason they clear the room at the ISB is so that nobody else who doesn't need to knows what they're actually doing on Gorman. Mon Mothma and Skolden mention catching up with their kids that just got married in the previous block of episodes. We will see what they do with her daughter, just because she's never mentioned in canon after this, so something tragic will probably wind up happening to her at some point. One of the other women at the party guesses Luthen's ring is Carvian, pre-Carvian. He says it's from the Lost Empire period. I think that's a reference to Knights of the Old Republic in the Rakata Infinite Empire. They referenced the Infinite Empire in the previous block of episodes too, and during season 1. Like, they reference the Rakata all the time, and on the Ahsoka series as well too. When the Imperial officers start joking about the Kali Cooler's drink, that might be a reference to the Bridget Kali character from the Clone Wars episodes. Krennic then shows up at the party, revealing that he helped Skolden get that art piece. It's the Lost Cairn of the Battle of the Carmine, which is something new that they created for the show. It's not from the lore. Mon Mothma, notable hater of Krennic, like they do not get along at all. Their whole battle that they have here, their verbal battle of words sparring, is a big reference to the Empire versus the Rebellion. Clay is able to get their listening device off of the other art piece, and she mentions the Tinian Codex was created 2,000 years ago, putting it during the Knights of the Old Republic era. She says it was created by a society that viewed blindness as an actual gift, so like it's meant to be read through touch, like Braille basically. During the Rebels heist, just because we know that this is all part of a ruse that Dedra's trying to pull off, we know it's going to end badly in some way, but this time it's actually Cinta winding up being killed through friendly fire. What the worst possible way to go during a battle like this, through friendly fire? I think mostly they use that just to show you how inept this group of rebels is, like completely disorganized. All to make it feel like the rebels being able to fight the Empire is the most insurmountable thing ever. Like, how could this crazy group of disorganized people ever come together to face something as strong as the Empire?
Are you crying?
To her credit though, Cinta does get a banger of a eulogy from Belsartha. There are a couple of funny moments during different storylines too, like the way they end the episode is actually pretty cool. Luthen and Clea joke about killing Krennic as they leave the party. His death, Krennic's eventual death, will be very ironic and kind of funny in a dark way. Killed by the Empire that he loves so much, killed by the Death Star that he helped work so hard to create. Andor and Bix capture and kill Gorst, but also very poetic death too. Like, this is actually pretty cool. Bix straps him into his own torture device, cranks the dial up to max, forcing him to experience the same torture that he used on her and everyone else until they blow up the entire floor that he's on, killing him. So if it wasn't clear, he is dead now. But I love the way they do like the cool guy walk away from the explosion without turning around to look at it. Very cool way to end an episode. But the ramifications of this moment are that the Emperor basically lost his best interrogator. But there's so many things going on during the episode, so many Easter eggs and references. If there are any that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. Overall, I felt like this block of episodes were way stronger than the previous block. We will see how they follow this up with next week's episodes. Absolutely cannot wait to see what weird stuff Dedra and Cyril Karn are up to next week. They're like the weirdest couple on this show. As usual, my episodes 7, 8, and 9 video will post next week after they release it. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. Everybody click here for the Mandalorian and Grogu trailer, and click here for my Thunderbolts review video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.